Okay, welcome everyone to week 6. We're going to talk about group policy this week. We're going to talk about what you can use it for, how you use it, how you apply group policy objects. But in a nutshell, group policy is how you push down configurations, software, printers, map drives, pretty much anything to do with Windows computers you can control through group policy. So we're going to go through just some, in the PowerPoint, we're going to go through how to do it and everything, and then in the labs this week, we're going to go through and actually do some group policies, some default ones and then some custom ones that you can do. So our learning objectives are: we're going to learn how to configure GPOs. We're going to manage the GPOs, learn how to do that. We're going to learn how to apply the GPOs to client computers, and then understand inheritance and blocking when it comes to GPOs. So configuring group policy. So you create what's called a group policy object, or GPO, with the appropriate settings. Single GPOs are applicable to thousands of users and computers. So you can do a configuration through group policy and have it apply to a lot of users and or computers, which reduces the administrative time and effort that it would take to touch every single computer. So the settings themselves are stored in two different sections. There's a computer configuration, so this is applied at the boot time of the computer, and then there's user configuration that is applied when a domain user logs in. Both applied from GPOs linked to a site, domain, or OU object containing the computer or user account. So wherever this GPO is linked, so if you have an organizational unit called marketing and this GPO is linked under in marketing, it's going to apply to any user or computer that is in that OU. So it's important to note that it applies to both the user and the computer. So if you store users and computers in the same OU, which is not recommended, those settings could be done from both sections of the GPO. So you can prevent conflicts, for accounts that receive several settings. So they're applied in a certain order, and this is where that inheritance comes in. So it's applied at the site level, the domain level, the parent OU, and then child OUs. So there's two default group policy objects in every domain. There's the default domain policy, and then there's the default domain controllers policy, which in our lab we're going to look at and do some stuff on. So configuring in the actual Active Directory environment is you go to one of the domain controllers, you start the group policy management tool, which is under administrative tools. So blocking and enforcing the GPOs, you can configure the block inheritance setting on an OU. So that's actually going to block it from inheriting any policies above it. And then you can do block inheritance on a domain itself. Reason you would do this is if you had a top level site GPO. And then if a GPO link is configured with the enforce setting, the GPO is applied to accounts and OUs having the block inheritance configured, so it overrides that. And then applied following the other GPOs to ensure settings override other GPO settings. So if you have the enforced, it doesn't really matter if you do the block inheritance setting. And here's kind of an example of what the group policy management screen looks like. You can see you have your domain, and then you have your default domain policy, you have your default domain controller policies, and then you have all of your organizational units. This is an example. So you see there's accounting, IT, marketing, production, and then you see here this has the blue dot on it, which means that it's got the block inheritance selected on it. And then you have a listing of your actual group policy objects, all of them here. So filtering GPOs, so you can basically change the security filtering on a GPO so that it only applies to specific users within wherever it's linked. So you can take the default domain policy, for example, what it's saying here, and remove authenticated users, which is pretty much everybody who logs in, and then add a specific user or computer groups or accounts there, right? So this will filter out everybody except for who's in that group or a specific user. So a WMI filter specifies hardware and software features that must be present on a computer before the GPO is applied, right? So I said you could push out software earlier. So that is, kind of a supplemental feature of this. So you can have it check to see if specific software is present before it actually tries to apply the GPO. And then to create and link GPOs, the best practice way to do it is to actually right click on the group policy objects folder and then click new and specify a name. And then once you have it created and the settings done, then you go in and you link it to an organizational unit. You can create it directly from the organizational unit. However, the reason I don't like to do that is because I like to specifically link it so that I know that it was done. Because if you create it in one folder, then you have to go back to the other ones and keep track of where you were at. So just a preference of mine. So this configuring the settings. So once you're in the editor tool, there's a computer configuration and user configuration section of each GPO. So there's policies and preferences folders underneath of there. Obviously policies apply to certain things, and then preferences usually apply to features in Windows. Policies are usually security, those type of things. And then software settings, there's actually a software settings folder that allows software deployment. So you can basically package up a MSI file, host it on a file share somewhere, and then push it out via the group policy object to install it, and it will actually ensure that it's installed on the computer. And there's 3 different methods to do that. So here's kind of the 2 different areas. So here's your policies, which has software settings, Windows settings. And you have that for each user configuration and computer configuration. So, and here you can see we have our software settings that it was discussing earlier. So here you have your user configuration. So this is basically saying that anybody who is getting this group policy object applied to them at the user account level is going to get Mozilla Firefox version 72 installed. And you can see that the source is coming from, server X, domain X, which is a file share, and then it has an MSI file there. So you actually deploy software packages when you do stuff under the software settings area. You right click on it and you click new package. Then you give the path to the file that's shared. Generally, you want to make sure that this file share gives all authenticated users access to read and execute from that folder. You click open, and then you select the deployment method, which is either published or assigned. And then group policy can also be configured to automatically uninstall software if the GPO no longer applies. So basically, you can remove the package, and there's an option that says immediately uninstall the software from users and computers option. That is going to then cause it to uninstall that software next time that it goes to check for group policy objects. The computer does that, is what I mean. And then there's a couple different ways that this could happen. So you have the administrator removes the GPO. You remove the link for the GPO, and then also you move the user computer account to another OU. So say they change departments or something, that would cause it as well. So Windows settings, under the GPO settings, it contains subfolders used to configure different Windows settings. So there's a security settings subfolder, which is where you basically set all of the security settings, like your password policies, lockout policy, all those type of things are under the security settings, and then account policies underneath of it. So that's where your, like it says right here, account lockout policy. And then what that does, the account lockout policy essentially, it's the setting that says if you type your password in 5 times wrong, lock your account out for X number of minutes, so that you prevent password sprays, stuff like that. So here you can see under Windows settings, you have your security settings, and then you have account policies, and then under user settings, it's a little bit different. You also have security settings, but for the most part, it's the same. So here you can see where you configure the password policy. So here's 24 passwords remembered. I think these are the defaults in Windows. See, minimum password age, maximum password age, minimum password length, complexity requirements, how many passwords to remember, those type of things. So here's kind of a table showing, the setting, and then what it actually means. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can read at your leisure. And then you have your account lockout policy. So your lockout duration, so this policy right here is stating that after 3 invalid logon attempts, we're going to lock out the account for 30 minutes. But we're going to reset the account lockout counter after 5 minutes, right? So every time you get a strike, essentially that's writing a timestamp. So you have your, you have one at 1 minute, and then it'd be 30 minutes from that point, and then it rolls over to the next one as you get your account locked out. And then here you can see for reset account lockout counter determines the number of minutes after a failed login attempt before the bad logon counter is reset to 0. So administrative templates is where a lot of the screensaver, those type of printers, any kind of settings in Windows, security, hardening settings, those type of things are usually going to be under administrative templates. So there's subfolders underneath of administrative templates for each area of Windows, and the components underneath. So the setting under the folder, under the admin templates folder, describes its function. And then for most of them, you either set it to enabled to provide the function or disabled to prevent the function. A lot of them will be not configured by default, but as you enable and disable things, that's when you can take control over those computers under the GPO, or that it applies to. So it's also important to note that you can expand the list of folders under the administrative templates. So third-party, software vendors make, they're called ADMX templates that you can import in to do specific things with specific pieces of software. So, and then legacy system templates and language customization still exists in Windows Server 2019. So here you can see under administrative templates, we have control panel, desktop, network, shared folders, start menu, system, Windows components. And then you can see on the right here, we're under desktop. Here's all of the settings that are under the desktop. So obviously for each one of these settings, you can enable it. And then it also might have additional settings within it once you enable it. Obviously, if you disable it, it's going to not apply. Obviously. So here, for example, remove the recycle bin icon from the desktop. This is disabled because we don't want anyone to remove the recycle bin from the desktop. We don't want that option to even be possible. So not configured, it would defer back to the default settings of Windows and allow the user to change it. Now we're saying they can't change it at all, so they can't even do anything with that. It's just automatically going to be there. And then you also have, here's an example of when the ADMX templates were pushed out, and it added a Mozilla folder and a Firefox folder. So, it looks exactly the same, but it's got different settings based on what the software is. So, group policy preferences are under the preferences folder. It contains two subfolders, which is Windows settings and control panel settings. It's very similar to the administrative templates area, and then similar features as like the administrative templates folders under there, and it allows for additional feature configuration options. But for the most part, you're going to be under Windows settings and administrative templates. Not usually preferences. And then under preferences, you can specify configuration action that must be performed. So this is more of an action framework. So you create a new it configures a new feature only if it does not already exist. Replaces an existing feature configuration with a new one. Update modifies a previously configured feature to include new settings, and then delete removes a feature if it was previously configured, right? So, and this is going to make more sense when we look at the screenshot here. So right here you see under Windows settings we have applications, drive maps, environment, file folders, all this kind of stuff here. So you can push out like registry settings through this. You can push out drive maps. So here you can see the M drive is going to show up as this on that computer. So this is a good way to do that. But for the most part, really all you're ever going to do in here is probably drive maps and registry. I haven't really come across too many situations where you need to use this otherwise, but group policy you can do a lot of things with, so a lot of people are doing a lot of different stuff. So managing the group policy objects, you select the GPO or GPO link in the management tool, highlight the settings tab, and click the show hide collapsible panels for each section folder or feature. So it's a really nice tool to be able to look at it. You can then save this out to HTML or XML formatted copy of the report. It's important to note that it's better to create more GPOs with less settings than one GPO with a lot of settings. So that's why it says here, best to minimize the number of settings configured in a GPO. So usually you make them for specific things. And then you have, a bunch of different GPOs. One applies your password policy. One applies your desktop background, or all those type of things are done in one singular GPO. That way it's easier to figure out when something's going wrong as well. And then backing up the GPOs ensures quick restore of the config settings in the event of a GPO corruption. So you can back these up. So you see here, this is where we're talking about the collapsible panels. So when you go under the group policy object on the left side in the tree, there's 4 tabs, and then you have your settings tab, and then all of these panels collapse and expand, so you can then look at each one and see all the settings configured. So just an easy way to look at it without actually going into it and going back and finding it. So clients do not receive, clients that are not updating. So what happens when you push a GPO out is your computer will automatically, or computers on the domain will automatically check in every so often. Usually when the computer restarts, optionally you can run the GP update /force, or if you want to do it in PowerShell, it's invoke-gp update. Basically, it's most of the time it's going to advise the user to reboot the computer, and then they log in, and it should have the updated settings on the computer. And then GPO configuration issues can prevent clients from applying a GPO. So how you can troubleshoot that is there is the GP result/R command. This is going to give you a readout of all of the GPOs that are being applied and if there's any issues with them. And then you can use the group policy results wizard in the group policy management tool as well to check on GPOs. So another, let me go back a slide real quick. Another tool that you can use is the resultant set of policy. So it's basically, I'm going to go over this in the lab, but it will actually, the GP result/R gives you like a command line printout, whereas if you do the rsop.msc command at a command prompt, it'll actually give you the look and feel of the normal group policy editor, and it's only going to show you the settings that were applied via GPOs, and it tells you which setting is being applied by which GPO, which is really important. So I go over that in the lab. I just wanted to go over that because it's not in the PowerPoint here. So in summary, group policy configures settings and software in the Active Directory environments, lets you push out settings and software to computers that are on the domain. It organizes the settings of the group policy objects into software settings, Windows settings, and administrative templates, and contain preferences as well that you can set. Computer configuration of a GPO and user configuration of a GPO. So most importantly is that the computer configurations apply to the computer itself. The user configurations apply to a user logging in or a user object that is in that location. A computer configuration applies to any user logging into that that client, and a user configuration applies to only users in that OU or where it's linked at for the GPO. And that is it for the PowerPoint this week. Again, I would go on to Lab 6.1 where we're going to go ahead and put this into action and test out creating some or modifying some existing GPOs and then creating some new ones. And then in Lab 6.2, you'll actually test those out and make sure they're working on the client computers.